right, let's call this meeting to order. 6:34. Everybody's here. Open forum? Anybody? 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 Okay, hearing nobody, closing the open forum, moving to the consent agenda. Consent agenda is typical 3 items. Unless someone would like to pull something for consideration or have an amendment to the agenda, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as provided. Anybody?
So moved.
There is movement. Is there a second? Motion.
I will second.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. All right, so first thing we have on our agenda is a conversation about downtown parking. This is headed up by the Chamber of Commerce. I don't know if you want to come up, Jim, and you may as well.
It's actually
The Business
Downtown
Coalition
Business
through the
we want our
through
we want
the
our
chamber.
thread through the
Yeah,
chamber. We're
we'll
under
get you
that
that.
umbrella.
Yeah, because you guys have worked a fair amount on this, so that's good.
Yeah, but we could do it without Jim.
So looking through the memos that you provided, we're looking at a couple of different areas. Like one of those is the rules themselves and how they're codified, and then another is enforcement of those rules and some strategies to get at that. So if that sounds correct, then I'll just let you jump into what your conversation is, and then we can continue it from there. So, I'm sorry.
Can I just say something first?
Sure.
I just want to say that we appreciate that you guys are letting us come in and discuss this. This started off with our business coalition talking about how we were going to deal with the construction on Highway 61, and then it's rolled into other issues with parking, and that was our main concern. So we really appreciate some of the suggestions, too, that have come from council. So thank you. And we really, really appreciate Patrick being a part of our committee, because it's nice to have his insight and his computer and his maps when we need those visuals. So thank you for that.
Visuals are good.
So
Yeah.
We're going to look at some tonight.
the last time we were before you, which was what, 6 weeks ago, perhaps, we took away 2 points from that discussion. One was that you were a bit more serious about enforcement than we had assumed in our initial proposal, which was quite modest. And 2, that you would like us to look more comprehensively at Chapter 70. And so we did that. And the first thing you have here is a cover memo that is an update to our recommendations earlier. The one point about enforcement, when we start talking about it, people get a little bit antsy that you will go from none to being really hard cases on this, and so the consensus of the parking committee was that please ease into it and see what works and don't be hard. Especially, I think this came out after we were reviewing the chapters, which we recommend that you delete on skateboards and things. Somebody really had a problem with skateboards at some point, and
As a product of the time.
It
Yeah.
was bad back
Yeah.
then.
so that's the enforcement part. Kelly suggested the 15-minute parking zones. One to really, I think, I think that you had 2 major reasons for that. One was local residents wanting just to get in and out and get something, and second, that if you added some 15-minute zones, it might reduce the need for additional handicap zones. And the parking committee really liked that, and instead of writing a set of those into the ordinance, we made a list of areas where we thought you might consider doing that. And if you want to write them in, fine, or however you want to do that. But one I wanted to especially mention was I talked with Chris Levine about making the entire area from the alley to the corner in front of on the south side of First Street, in front of the liquor store, a 15-minute zone. He really liked that, and especially because he says that there are a lot of trucks pulling boats that get in there, and he'd like to see them move very quickly. And so That was an additional one, and the others you can see there, and we're happy to answer questions about those. Those are all just suggestions. I think the rest of that memo is pretty self-explanatory. The memo that comes next was the one we gave you when we were here before, and then that's followed by the recommendations that we make on changes to Chapter 70. One change we made from when you first saw our altered version of Chapter 70 was we had suggested possibly having RV parking in various spots. We cut all of that out as being too fussy, messy. Just send them down to the RV park. We're helped in that by the fact Dan Riddle was saying that there was at one point, that's where they went, and there was a big sign over.
Artist
to the
Point.
coast.
He means Artist Point.
Yeah,
What did I
Yes,
say?
you said
RV park.
but we're thinking of RVs. So.
Oh, sorry, yeah. The
RV
Artist
parking.
Point. The Artist Point
Artist Point.
parking lot, sorry.
Yeah.
But there was apparently a large sign over Broadway on Highway 61 that said down there, and then another one here that
said there were
directed them
3.
down. And anyway, so we're kind of suggesting that you consider going back to that. And I think that you heard just a week ago that the construction of the new DNR facility over on the southwest corner is on for next summer. So that means, I think, the contract with them on parking and stuff will move over there and free up Artist Point for you to do whatever you want. And so maybe an RV parking area would be part of what you might want to consider there. I don't know how you want to go through this proposal. Do you want to go just page by page?
I
Which page
kind
are you
of,
on? Page 2?
I kind of,
Well,
I
we're in
kind
that
he's just
section.
going over these. I mean, I read through what they put, I don't know if we have to go through each thing. I thought it was pretty self-explanatory,
Yeah.
what you said. I had a question as to regarding, and I know I don't believe the business is in operation anymore, but Segways, is that something that we see downtown at all?
It's not around
Only
anymore.
a Bob's Surprise on them.
The one that was,
That's gone away.
There was a rental company 2 summers.
yeah, it
except for
hasn't
this
been
one.
around.
Okay, I didn't know if any
I
of
haven't
that
seen
was to be, okay.
Yeah.
And we
Didn't
don't.
think about that.
We don't have much skateboard traffic or any issues now anymore?
Just
No.
bikes.
Oh, no, there's one other change I should mention, I think, and that concerns bicycles.
Okay.
We recommended taking away all of the prohibitions on using sidewalks and things, except on Wisconsin, which is the busiest street. But one reason for that, Mayor, is that I've encountered families on Broadway here, clearly coming from your shop, rentals, little kids, 5, 6 years old. I clearly understand why they don't want to be in the street. Yeah, it's a little, you have to dodge around them a little bit, but I'm down here a lot, and it's not an overwhelming problem, and so we suggested that you not prohibit skates, skateboards, bicycles on sidewalks, except along Wisconsin, where confrontations between pedestrians and those vehicles would be a problem.
And for the record, whenever people do rent bikes or people seek, services at the bike shop, I do inform them of what the rules are for
Sure.
riding. Sometimes
There's a
they're,
bike lane on Wisconsin too, right?
yeah, well, and especially on
So you
Broadway.
get to the very end of it.
Yeah,
gets
then it
very
just
confusing.
disappears.
It gets very,
Spot.
very confusing,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
But as far as Broadway is concerned, which is where I do send most
Sure.
people, that road is wide enough that it's not really a problem. So,
I actually think that the bike lane on the west side of Broadway is a real problem, partly because of diagonal parking. I back out of there every day, and I couldn't see a bike. I can barely see cars. It's really a problem, and that's why we recommended that you at least consider that newfangled notion that MnDOT's using in some places where they're doing back-in diagonal parking.
yeah.
I actually saw that at work in a western town, small town, over the last month, and it worked very well from what I could tell. So, I know it's odd, but
It's, in the conversations I've had with people around town about that concept, a lot of people are not super excited.
I think most of it would be, for myself, is that we've never done it before.
Well,
I
that's
mean,
true.
really.
That's totally true.
It's
but
kind of
it's
like
also-
everything else, it's scary because it's like, oh, but I personally hate parallel park, so that's more intriguing to me than backing out here. It is. Was there anything that you guys saw in here that you wanted us to reconsider? Like, you saw our time frames for parking and no parking and,
I saw the downtown worker parking suggestion.
yeah, what did you think of that?
Uh,
I mean, we're open to any, this is just kind of brainstorming with a big group where we all have different opinions, and this is kind of where we all kind of, got to an agreement.
Do you, I just wondered, and it's in relation to this, so then you can go back to, do we know about roughly how many people downtown workers are parked down, and I'm going to say at 11 a.m. roughly? Most people are kind of in place with knowing.
We don't, and we talked about that, and I can't remember who was going to look into that. I think somebody in our group was going to look into that. I mean, we could guess, like I'll have probably 6 people in the store working at that, but we have our own parking. I know you don't want to talk, but how many? 6?
I'm going to guess 70, 75.
Didn't Julie do some investigating on that?
She did. I have a letter. I don't have it with me, and you have a question. I don't mean to cut in.
No, this covers what I was going to talk about.
I really like this suggestion, and my thought is, and that's where I get back to the number, is that I know we have this lot and the lot across the street. My preference would be that maybe this lot would be designated for downtown workers only. City Hall will need their number for our people, but beyond that it would be only in this lot, preferably, and by sticker. So that we could patrol and see who's in there. And then if there are other such spots, then we'll need to figure out how many. But some people I see, I know Jean has people that walk to work because I see it every day. I know other people probably do. I know Craig's got just a couple people over there. They have some spots right there that they park in. Like you said, you provide for yours. So I don't know if this would be enough or if we'd have to maybe expand, but it's a starting point.
I mean, Jim's even asked us, there are times when we have more than what's available behind the building. So we're trying to figure out how to make the best of that spot, because he doesn't want us during the summer. We've been trying not to park in that main parking lot where we have been lucky to have, but he wants it to be more available for visitors.
Right.
The sticker idea came up,
Yes.
and most people thought it was a terrific idea.
I like it. I like it a lot, and I've gone around and looked now, and for as much as I can identify, I see several businesses where they have their people, where people are parked right on the street, definitely in front of the business. And I think to myself, the lot really, truly, for some of them, is less than a block away, and I think people could manage that. If they can't, then obviously that's a different discussion, if there's
Right.
physical capabilities that restrict you. But I like that thought of having it here and us providing them a sticker for such. We also have, and people are right, is the display on the corner here daily of a canoe. Is that the best use of a spot? I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but we're kind of taking up potentially 2 spots there. Is that the best place for it, or is there somewhere else that it could be and still be secure while not taking up those spots? So I think we really need some of the businesses to jump on board with us. Sometimes I don't like the word buy-in, but that has to be a conscientious decision by employers as well to work with their people. But I think that we could offer up that solution in part of this lot.
Just to let you know, that is part of our conversation, is working with each other as managers and business owners to talk more to our employees and engage them more in that discussion. If you don't tell them, they don't think
Right.
they're, some people need to get that circle, I call it the circle of life picture. If they can't park here, they can't shop, you can't get a paycheck. I mean, make it easier for people.
Right.
So I think we've been talking about that in our meetings
Yeah.
strongly.
And I've had a number of conversations with people in other towns, other employers, or in some cases, city officials. Uniformly, they're, oh my God, we haven't done that for years. You do not park in front of your business. That's just the way it is. And so this is not something draconian that you are proposing. It's common.
Jay, did you have?
That was pretty much what
Okay.
the conversation was about.
Sorry.
Was about, no, that's good. We got there.
We're all on the
Was
same
about
page.
the downtown worker stickers and the parking concept, which
That's a good
I
idea.
also think that is a, I like the idea of having a space that people who work downtown can count on having
Mhm.
a place to park. But
Right.
we do also need to know how many people that is.
Well, we don't need to know because it's going to change on a pretty regular basis, and we can't codify it. We can pretty well assume that that row or that whole parking lot is less than the number of employees that are parking downtown on any given basis. So I like the concept too. How we're going to actually operate it is a different question. And some sort of permit system where it's stickers or hangers or something to designate how many of them are there going to be given out. Anybody
Right.
who has an employee, how do we regulate? You know, I worked there for a little bit and I got a hanger, but I keep it. And so there's just some of those details that we kind of have to figure out how we're going to operate it.
Well, and I think that can be handled basically by an employer is whatever we give, and maybe it is the hanging signs that, you know what, just like when you're given a key or a card or whatever it may be when you work, that's part of the things that when you leave employment, you have to turn back in.
I think I'm guessing what you mean is kind of what we deal with sometimes too, is when you're done working, you don't get the spot anymore.
Oh,
That's
Right.
another issue.
Or
Yeah.
I kind of took that as what you meant, like they're only in there for 2 hours and then they're going home.
Well,
That-
I'll park back here
Right.
during Fisherman's Picnic if there's a spot.
Because they
right?
have
I
a
mean,
permit.
you know, that's probably the only time I ever drive downtown. So,
Right.
but the other issue is the number of them. And are we going to give out 100 if there's 100 employees and then there's still only 30 spaces?
That's a good point.
So do they have to fight over them? And then what? But you know, that's not a reason not to do it. That's just an issue to deal with. And
Right.
and what's great about this is that there's an organized group that's got all the important players that's talking about it, so they can help us figure it out.
Yeah, but it's easy for us to have ideas, and you guys have to figure out how to make it work. So we're happy to
that's
help, but
good.
we don't.
I mean,
You're going to help us.
basically just said just kind of flip-flop back and forth on that. We need you guys
We have to do it
help us
together.
gather the
Mhm.
information
Yeah.
so that we can actually put together rules that are effective and,
Right.
and they're accurate. So that's the partnership here. I think that makes a lot of sense.
So this went from the parking committee to the larger Grand Marais Business Coalition to the universal email list of business people in Grand Marais, and this is the result of that. There wasn't a lot of feedback, so
That always
Maybe
comes
next week.
later.
Yeah, right?
Next
Yeah,
week.
wait till they have to vote
Yeah,
on it,
exactly.
then you'll get, or
wait
after
till you
they
paint
vote on it.
the curbs, and that's when they'll start. But yeah,
I haven't spent any time talking to Chris about this yet, so I've treated this as a policy exercise where we're talking about concepts and not we're creating an ordinance for you to pass yet.
Oh,
I think
yeah,
there's a lot of language in
definitely.
here that we'll need to
Right.
clean up, particularly when we're trying to describe locations. We need to figure out the best way to do that legally. And there's some of these concepts that I do want to spend some time with Chris on, but there's nothing in here that I thought we couldn't do this.
And some of these things that some of the 9 things that you identified in the memo are things that don't need ordinance to make
Right.
happen.
Yeah.
Those are
Right.
just agreements that need to be hashed out between the Grand Portage Shuttle and the county for using that lot instead of using this lot, and we're kind of moving parts and pieces around
Right.
to more effective ways. So this, looking at the council to see what the take of this is, I think that we have some good suggestions for things that can help clean up what the downtown parking situation is, and then we can hopefully start talking about what that looks like legal implication-wise.
If you want that, if you're ready for me to do that, I will talk to Chris about those things. We'll turn this into an ordinance draft and bring it to a future meeting for you to actually vote on it.
one other point I'd like to make that I think was a powerful motivating force for us was Anton's point that he's driven RVs around the country, and when he goes into a town, he has no idea whether something is enforced or not, so he assumes it is and behaves as though it is. And we're assuming that a lot of the enforcement will happen that way because we're a tourist town. Visitors coming in have no clue whether we have a local police department or a sheriff's department or whatever. And we're hoping that a lot of them will just obey the signs because they make the assumption that he makes when he's traveling.
I think there's a lot of people too, though, that have been repeat visitors to this community for many years.
Maybe
Um,
understand some
but-
patterns that are.
And,
Well,
like
but
I
the new
said,
signs might help.
I think that the enforcement piece would be soft. I don't think that we're going to come out swinging the bat right away, but there'll be communications. We have many ways to do that, and that we'll be working with people. And maybe for the first year, it's simply putting notes or something on vehicles or whatever, telling them, and talking with repeat offender businesses or whatever, that, hey, this is going on, and then it's what, the next year comes around.
See how it goes.
Can we look at some of the maps that Patrick's been working on?
There we go. There's more.
The north side.
It is today.
No RVs can park.
So this is the line that draws the area that's described in the rules when we're talking about, well, basically the parking timing.
Comes down to Wisconsin Street.
That's something to think about.
Yeah, that's all the two-hour limit area.
All the green here are the first ideas of where we would put 15-minute parking zones. So when we pass an ordinance, we're not going to put in the ordinance where those spaces are, because that needs to be changeable. The council will be able to designate them, basically, and undesignate them. But, so we've got, that's the liquor
Java.
store right here, this is over by Java. I guess one little space here.
The one across from Blue Water, though, that's right in front of the Joins parking lot, so that really has to back up to get in front of Picnic and Pine. Has to be over there, because that's the first parking spot.
Yep.
Oh, that's true.
An
Okay.
entrance there.
But that, in terms of sorry for scrolling, the number of spaces we're talking about, that's kind of an idea for that.
The,
Go ahead.
the Wisconsin from Broadway to the harbor is excluded from the 2-hour. And the reason for that was that East Bay Suites has used those on-street parking for a long time, and it didn't feel right to just pull them
This
away.
piece.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The same is true on Broadway, south
Yes.
from Wisconsin. There's some use of the street parking by Shoreline and by Cobblestone.
For
And
they have boats and trailers.
Beth's statement to us was that, yeah, they have people park in front of the fudge shop and other things, but they don't seem to be there late in the morning, and she doesn't have a real problem with it. So we thought exempting that would be a good idea.
And these rules now, in what you propose, these are rules for the summer season. These are not
These are rules for the summer
for
season.
year round.
It's from
so, yeah,
June
so
1st
that's
to
also
November
something
1st.
to keep in mind. because-
Another spot that I'm thinking 15-minute parking maybe would be in front of the donut shop, that south side on the north side of the building there.
Maybe.
Yeah,
The only-
so right in here.
But that's that area that we left out because of the
Because of
East
East
Bay.
Bay.
Yeah, but most of the East Bay people
I don't
park.
know.
I don't usually see the majority of East Bay people there.
Sure.
I think, because most of the time, if I go at 7 in the morning or 7:30, truly it's vacant, or the people whose vehicles I recognize are in having their coffee and donuts.
Yeah, I don't see a lot of parking here
Just
in
wanted to
front of Beaver
mention-
House either.
to the one by, and
Oh,
this
yeah,
is just
no.
our suggestions, but the one by Java, that there's actually two.
Mhm.
And the reason correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, is that Voyager also asked, because they have people that just want to park and run in and grab a growler, and one of their
Oh.
representatives was at our meeting and mentioned that.
Well, those two.
So they don't care what's that, there's a crosswalk there, so that's just to, but then it's back to, is it allowed on 61?
There actually isn't a crosswalk there, there's just a
Well, there's
sign.
the
But there will
sign,
be.
But there will be.
And there
Yeah.
also won't be two spots there anymore, because it's turning into a one-way through the Java.
Oh, that's right.
There's
So that
parking
will disappear.
Two sides and stuff.
There'll be more on-street parking because there's a lot less driveway.
Oh, yeah, right.
Oh.
I suppose it'll just separate.
So then
Yeah.
that is an option.
It's still
I mean,
possible.
Mhm. It's an
I
option.
agree with you, it should be flexible, because you might have one somewhere and it might not be working,
Well,
and you might say
businesses
it should be
change.
over here.
What they are, how they operate
Exactly.
changes, so we just
Totally
need to be
agree
able to
with
do
that.
it.
We
Yeah.
also exempted Second Avenue West and Fourth Avenue West. Second Avenue West, right where, in front of the library there, there's no parking
Well,
anyway.
up here, yeah.
And then Fourth Avenue has residences on it, and I don't honestly think that you can reasonably limit parking in front of residences to 2 hours. Or at least that was the reasoning that we used.
And
Makes
then
sense.
also the Harbor Inn.
Yeah, that's not on there.
That one.
We had
Well, it's
talked
not
about-
15-minute, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong page.
No, Harbor Inn, we had talked about allowing the spaces on 2nd Avenue West, right there, right about there where the hand is, from the beginning of the building down to the corner, to be exempted from 2 hours, because there is some use of those spaces by clients
Lodging.
at
That's Harbor Inn.
That's not actually marked on there, but it may be in the narrative.
It's on our other.
Well, if you, I mean,
Well,
that's,
you know,
that's
both
easy to do.
the East Bay and the Harbor Inn, that presents a bit of an issue to us, particularly in the winter time. And although we're talking about 2-hour parking here, there is no overnight parking in any of these zones in the
Right.
wintertime. So the idea that we're going to exempt them because their guests are staying there is a problem, because we have to come and plow that snow in the wintertime.
Right.
And we don't want people parked there overnight. So that's something that they might need to continue to think about.
Although I think that the 2-hour limit is only June 1st to November 1st.
But in November, then we'd turn, well, we're going to have calendar parking pretty soon, but in the meantime, we have no overnight parking downtown.
Yeah, right.
And the way that we do snow plowing, it's going to continue to be no overnight parking downtown, even with the calendar parking.
Even the whole year round?
During the winter
in the
season.
winter.
The winter season, okay.
Yeah.
And what do you define as a winter?
The November to April. And we've,
November
you know,
15th.
Yeah, we're
The
working
time
on it.
frame, that's
Whenever-
possible.
Working on it.
Whenever we need it.
So it's not a problem. It
Yeah.
should work together.
It should work.
Right,
well.
and that would be relatively easy to, to add a line to the ordinance that says unless otherwise.
And I would
signed.
think that, especially
By the
for
city.
Harbor Inn, I mean, they do have parking.
Yes,
They just have
they have a lot.
additional,
Yes,
so
a lot in the back.
the winter shouldn't be.
and the lot in the back after the Highway 61 project will be much better defined.
Right, so
When-
then,
and there's always, if they're helping us out in some other way to make that maintenance work, then it doesn't have to be a rule that makes
right.
this happen.
And
Good.
again, it's suggestions for you
Yeah.
guys, and that's why we're glad you're looking at this too.
Okay,
I just want to show you this other thing. There was a question about where handicap spaces exist, so.
Yeah, it's,
There are quite a few.
don't you have it marked on the map? Oh, the blues.
All the
yes.
blue dots are handicap spaces, so
Can you, there you go.
Yeah.
there's quite a few of them.
dots get bigger, yeah. Yep, that's helpful to know.
Mhm.
It doesn't really seem like there's any significant dead spots for handicap parking in the areas, as far as what's useful compared to what's available.
Yeah.
That's a hard conversation.
Well, in a combination with the 15-minute parking spaces that might serve
Yeah. that's
handicapped individuals too.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're hoping. It's like,
For
it could be a
drop-off,
drop-off, pick-up.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
and
just for
the
information.
one on First Avenue West there was probably there because of the pharmacy, which is no longer,
Yeah.
we may need to look at where is there a better use of that spot. It's a spot for sure, but they're probably,
I don't suspect there'll be a lot of usage there anymore. But now that with our colony being there, we can have a conversation with them.
Might be something to ask because of the different people coming through. They might
Sure.
want one.
It might be a
They're
handy
not
place.
identified on Highway 61. Is there any thought that we would want to place any on Highway 61 for any of the businesses there? And right
That would be
now,
a
we have
conversation with.
pretty wide parking areas, so
Which doesn't necessarily make them better as handicap spaces.
it doesn't make them accessible. but-
No. I think the way a lot of these have come about, including the pharmacy and the one in front of the Legion and the one in front of Blue Water, these were businesses that came to us and said, we think there's a need, and we'd like you to designate one.
Right.
And that same thing can happen with any business on Highway 61. They can approach you and say, we think there's a need, and we'd like you to designate.
Are we limited by restrictions of that being a Minnesota State and aid highway?
They allow you to set parking rules.
So
Which
you
is great.
they can come to the city and say,
Great.
we think, okay, good to
One
know.
one of the, I think, more significant changes here is extending the time-limited zone up to Fifth Avenue West. Because when, this hasn't been enforced since at least, or changed since '77, and there were no businesses up there. And so now I think that's going to be a big change.
I
there have been businesses. The Loafer was there, the Forest Service was at the bottom of the Gunflint back then.
Trying to think.
In the Mayhew
Not the same
building?
density, but.
Not in the same density, no. There
And
were,
having all that activity along the south side of the lake walk there, where people park to go to the Angry Trout and everything like that I think that's an area that should be included in this limit, just because those are such vibrant, that and Harbor House and the pharmacy and Dockside, like all those things are such vibrant
Harbor House is
areas.
closing.
Well, I know that, but for right now, we're looking at.
So are you saying handicap or
Just saying to include it in this
Time
zone.
limit.
the time zone?
To
Oh,
include it in the zone.
yes,
The way
Yes,
it's already-
whether it's an hour and a half or 2 hours, but
yeah.
with the Angry Trout, this could be an hour and a half waiting.
You're going to lose your parking spot.
There you go.
All right, well, just wanted to make sure you got a chance to see all the things that they've been looking at.
Are those
too.
the fun ones we have? What else do we have?
That's it. That's all the fun ones.
And that's
Okay.
why we love Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
Thank goodness.
It's a good reason.
I need visuals.
So,
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you for
Thanks
your
for
work.
all the good input back, too.
do we, as a council, do we feel like we're at a point where we can start working on ordinance language on this, or do we want to wait a little bit more and take a step back on it?
Didn't Mike just say he was going to talk
Well, he
with
said he
Chris?
was
If you want
asking
me
us
to,
if he
yeah.
wanted
Oh.
to.
I assume the answer is yes.
I think it's appropriate to move this forward.
That's kind of what I was thinking too. But
Yeah,
I just wanted to take the temperature here, see what we're up against.
It would be nice to have this in place so that by next spring, we could even start advertising something. So as we move into 2020, this is in place and we can get information out.
I would agree.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. So you've got your instructions, Mike.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
ladies.
Thank
The
you.
calendar parking, we went through and made some suggestions to that and passed the first.
We're looking at next meeting to have the follow-up.
Okay, that's just what I was wondering.
Just to make sure all the players are available to come to it, so.
Okay, great.
Because you did have some questions that you wanted to have some follow-up with some of the other players.
I will be gone at the next meeting. I will be in Seattle.
Oh, fun.
I hope it's fun.
I hope it's
It
not
will
raining.
be.
Cool. All right, so the next thing we have on the agenda has to do with the alley that connects Fifth Avenue West and Fourth Avenue West behind the pharmacy, Harbor House, etc.
Here it is.
That's the one. So we had some conversation about improvements to this alley for the Highway 61 project and ongoing business activity there. So we went out to LHB and asked them what they would do if they were going to do an assessment on this to see what's feasible and how the improvements to that alley can be done. If you looked through the packet, you'll see that there's a resolution here to take on improvements to the alleyway, and then also a breakdown of what LHB suggested, which, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like they're talking about grading to the center so that it drains down the center instead of draining to one of the sides down to Fourth.
That's what we imagine the solution's going to be. So what are the issues, first of all? There's a lot more traffic here than there used to be because of some of the business activities going on that we need to manage, both the condition of the pavement, which is gravel right now, and also the having some sort of protections in there so that the speeds are appropriate. Drainage is also a big problem. It generally is graded towards the east, and drainage generally goes that way, but a lot of those properties on the south side of the alley are dealing with runoff from the alley, and because it's gravel, it doesn't stay very well maintained to move water in a predictable way, so we want to deal with the drainage issues as well. And then there's just a lot of access issues. You can see the number of driveways that are attached to this alley, and some of them are really, really busy driveways right now, and I don't know that we're going to be able to solve that problem, but we at least have to be able to understand it when we're looking at the rest of the improvements. So the idea would be to pave it. We assume it's going to need to be paved so that we can deal with the water and then figure out how to also incorporate all the driveways. So it's a fairly complex alley improvement as far as they go. We haven't done a lot of alley improvements. We don't have any sort of record to fall back on and say, when we do an alley improvement, here's the participation we expect in the neighboring properties. We've generally been telling people, we don't do alley improvements unless the neighboring properties ask us to, and then we will assess them the cost of those improvements. This one started when we talked about Highway 61, though, as a potential truck loading route for these businesses. I don't know if that's as relevant as it was when we had that initial conversation, but those other issues still need to be dealt with. So this resolution that you have in front of you is step one in, if you determine that you want to assess any of the cost of the property owners, you need to start the process by ordering a feasibility report from the engineers. That's what we'll be hiring LHB to do. They'll put a simple design together. They'll give us a cost estimate. They'll talk about what techniques they want to use to fix those things. And it'll cost about $5,000 for them to do that work.
So in here, in our memo, it says that there has been some preliminary conversation with adjacent property owners.
Yes.
What is our feedback from them? How many have we talked to?
We've talked to 2/3 of them for sure. The feedback's been all the issues that were on the list. And then the other feedback is we want to stay involved in this. So after the feasibility report is done, what I imagine we'll do is sit down with all of them and look at it and talk about what we're planning on doing, make sure it works, make sure we have thought of all the issues, that they understand how it's going to go, and then we'll have to talk about money if we intend to have any assessments to the adjacent property owners.
I went back there last night and I measured everything, took pictures of everything. What's the setback?
From the alley?
What's the setback?
There are no setbacks.
Not in the multi-use zone.
Okay, well, there's trees in there, there's shrubs and brush and so on and so forth. So is that stuff on city land or on personal ownership?
That's a good question.
Well, that's one of the things we'll have to figure out with this feasibility study, but this is the survey data that they're going to use, what you see on here. This is survey data that MnDOT collected in their Highway 61 project. So what I think is the case is that brush and trees that are on the west end of the alleyway are encroaching inside of the 14-foot alleyway.
There's a tree there.
Yeah. I think
There's a pole on the other side,
The utility poles.
on the south side. What's happening to that utility pole?
Are on a separate project. They're all going to be removed, and we're going to be burying all those overhead wires before any alley improvements happen. That's probably something we'll do this year yet. And that's both because of this project that we're talking about doing, but also because a lot of our overhead stuff is in the alley heading to the north. This is actually a T-shaped alley in this block. And we can't access that stuff, and we really haven't been able to for some time without crossing private property. And we don't want to do that, so we just want to move that stuff out of the way so we can get to it and keep it maintained. There's also a hydrant on the west end.
Yeah, what are you going to do with that?
Probably nothing, but potentially remove it. It's being replaced at the bottom of Fifth Avenue, so Tom's
One of the
talked
new
about
ones, yeah.
that one being redundant and not necessary.
It's going down to the bottom.
Yeah. But one of the reasons we might want
There's
to
something
remove it
else
is
in there
it's-
besides a hydrant? Is there electrical or something sticking up in there?
There's like one of those green stanchions for electrical.
that-
but I
yeah.
think that
Is
was
that
all-
ours or is that telephone?
it's-
Can't remember.
It's not ours.
Okay.
It would. I'm assuming that would be relocated as well with the pole.
Yeah.
Well, my biggest problem with this is we backed ourselves into the corner now because this is going to be the solving project for the lack of space for vehicles that are getting pushed away from Highway 61 because we're getting rid of our turning lanes. So this is what we have. It's a hell of a place to try to drive a truck into unless you do a lot of getting rid of stuff. Like the hydrant, it's got to go. Maybe trucks are going to have to. I used to go through that for 19 years with my garbage truck, and the only way I could get in there is come down the Gunflint and enter in from the north. And then I missed that house,
Mrs. Jackson's?
Mrs. Jackson's house. I'd miss her roof by 2 inches every time I went through there. When I did that, none of that Miller stuff was built. The houses were back. There was room, but it's a very narrow alley to expect 40-foot reefers to be driving through. And I really
Good.
don't. The other problem they face is when they come out, there's no cars you see on the street, but when I did my measuring, there were cars parked
Right up next.
next to Noskers, there were cars parked on the other side. Now that truck's got to turn out of there and try to either go down to Highway 61 or go up if that's his easier turn, left or right.
So that's one of the things that's identified in the feasibility study, right? Is saying that like the turning radiuses have to be taken a look at for tractor trailers.
Yes.
And so then we should probably make sure that when Brad, if we approve this to go forward.
Well, you know,
that Brad
I've
Scott
been
knows to
fighting
calculate
DOT
with
on
the-
all my stuff over there yet. I haven't signed my packet. I know the gentleman that was here the other week said everybody signed their packets. There's 4 or 5 of us that have not signed packets yet.
Mhm.
And their turning radiuses are really kind of arguable because you can put somebody in a truck and demonstrate that they don't work.
Well, and that's what
And
I'm
that's
saying
what
is that-
bothers me about spending. I don't care about spending money and fixing this alley up. I think we've got a lot of alleys that need to be fixed up. But it just pisses me off that we backed ourselves into this corner now. This is where we're going to unload trucks, okay? And I was at every meeting, the engineers took a big red marker and circled the highway in front of Angry Trout and the Harbor House. Oh yeah, we got to do something. Every meeting, nothing. I did see 2 weeks ago an Upper Lakes truck or one of the food trucks had gone down the alley, the driveway next to the Angry Trout and unloaded down by the fish house and came out the other alley. Only to realize now, that other street by the North House, only to realize now that that is going to be taken away by DOT. So driving down through there and unloading big trucks is not going to be an option. It'd be nice if it was going to still be an option, but they're taking away that driveway, and I don't know why they are, but they are. I just think that this is a really narrow spot, very narrow. You've got 13 feet from that pole to the edge of the alley
from the existing
where that
power
tree is. Now, if you take the poles out, you gain maybe 17, 18 inches.
pole. Oh, geez. Okay.
You know,
Well, you could just look at, there's buildings.
Right.
yeah, the buildings are
16
right.
feet away from
The
each
buildings
Yeah,
are right.
how are you
The
gonna
buildings
put
are
a
right on the
cement trailer
dirt.
between two
They're right on the
houses?
dirt edge. You've got about 5 inches of grass, and then you've got tire tracks.
Right.
He's got a 2-foot box sticking out on the second level. On that white roof you see, there's 2 of them. They stick out 2 feet. I don't know how high they are. If they're more than 12 or 13 feet, they won't get hit by a truck. If they are lower, then you gotta worry about trucks taking them off his building.
How wide is a typical tractor trailer, like reefer truck? Do you know? Like
100 and some inches, aren't they?
I think they're 10.5 feet.
10.5 feet.
They,
Yeah, so that's
I mean,
still-
trucks. Let's
Needless to say, it's not a lot
What, you know,
of
everything that Craig says is right on. It's a super tough place to drive a truck. That was one of the original reasons we were talking about this. That's not what we're talking about as much anymore, because the restaurant's not necessarily going to be there, and so the folks that would have potentially been using big trucks aren't. There are big trucks that use this right now, because they're still getting their garbage collected. They're still getting their propane delivered. Not big tractor trailers necessarily, but I would bet there are some of those too. This is more about just a lot of many kinds of traffic using this alley, and the people that are around there wanting us to look at improving it.
So there's a lot of car traffic, I'll give you that.
A lot of
I mean, that's
car
the only
traffic,
drugstore
yeah.
in town now, so that's
And
increased.
it's hard to
500
say,
fold.
like, is that traffic level going to be the same in 5 years? You see these things change pretty fast.
Well, and one of the
Well, I
other,
just hope that your ambition here is not to feel that this is going to be where trucks are going to unload product to whatever businesses are back there, because you're asking a lot from a guy driving a truck semi with a 40-foot trailer that this is his access. Maybe some guys fine, but you know, I know how they unload now to these businesses, and that's occupying a turning lane that they're not supposed to do. I do understand that, but we're taking that away, and then they have no place to unload. My biggest concern is how a truck going through there is not servicing the Angry Trout. Where is he unloading?
That That,
You know,
and
he's
we
not
had all those
servicing.
conversations with all those businesses, and we're not trying to say this is a solving all their problems sort of solution here. This is a giving people options.
Well, I get
And-
that.
and
I'm just
if they don't
I'm
work,
very
then we have to
disappointed
come
that
back.
the DOT has not addressed it. They avoided it. They closed their ears on it. They made people feel like they were going to do something, and every meeting they didn't. And so here's where we sit. And it's very frustrating to know what's going to happen. I mean, I think most people have enough common sense to figure out it's a mess now. And when the highway gets narrowed and turning lanes get taken away, it's going to be more of a mess. And that's how I see it. And this is not going to solve the mess. It might help traffic flow from the pharmacy through, and clean up the alley and put a better base down for people to drive on. But it's very tight through there. Those buildings are right up to the property line.
Now, some of the concerns we heard from property owners are that if we make improvements, it's going to be too easy to get through too, and that
I don't think it's made too
speeds
easy yet.
are already an issue on this alleyway, where people are using it as a cut through.
Well,
And we'll have to think about traffic calming as well. That's something that LHP will give us ideas about.
no. But I think it lends to a bigger question and down the road planning. When we look at this and knowing that you can't predict what the future brings and holds, zoning allowed for that house on the north side to be put there. Is it a garage that's right across from it? It's not a house. I mean, zoning things have allowed this to happen, where now it's created a really large problem, either for us or for the businesses or for a homeowner. And I think that speaks to something as we go and start looking at things again, that I think we have to, or future councils have to be conscientious about. We've just gone, oh yeah, nothing's there, sure, this makes sense. But in this mixed-use zone that we have, are things really going to fit or make sense? I think that speaks to some of our zoning things that we have to address. And obviously, we can't do that here tonight, but I just think it's well worth a talking point to say, hey, we need to think about the decisions that we make and what the future holds in certain neighborhoods. Because this all used to be a neighborhood, and it has turned into really truly a business district over the last 40 years. So as we look at some of these things going forward, I just think we have to keep that in mind.
What was the other thing I read here about possibly doing away with a driveway? I didn't quite get that.
I thought it had to do with the combination of,
Doing away with the
Parking and driving.
pharmacy's driveway. I didn't quite, possibility of getting rid of how they access the pharmacy and
Yes.
pushing it north?
Yeah,
So everybody comes through at the alley point and then into the parking lot?
part of the problem is that there's 3 driveway entrances right next to each other on Fifth Avenue. And the nice thing about this is that Brad Scott and LHB has also been hired by the county to do the design for Fifth Avenue West. And in that, just like when MnDOT came through and did their design, they're going to look at consolidating some of those driveway accesses. That having that driveway there means there's actually less space to park in that parking area and less space to park on the street. So
Then the fire hydrants has to get moved.
Yeah.
yeah, and it like I said, that's one of the things we're looking at is just removing it.
Well, and would we,
Because you gotta turn around that,
Well, that fire hydrant has been a problem.
It's been hit a few times since I've been here.
Many times. I mean, I worked in that building at Cobblestone, and, I don't know how many people backed into that, even though there's rocks around it and, whatever, but, that, in order to make even any kind of entrance to that alley effective, needs to get removed. So, I mean, I don't think that's,
Yeah, I think that's
well, and
pretty
I'm also
clear.
thinking, I don't even know what the limits are. It's changed. It's a county road, obviously. They could tell us, but do you want a truck with a 40-foot trailer coming down that hill with the potential of losing its brakes and going into that intersection to try to turn into that spot? There's a lot to be looked at.
well, either it has to come down the hill or take up the downward lane to make a swing to get into it. You see what I'm saying? So if there's no traffic coming down, you can swing wide and go in. If
Right.
there's traffic coming down, he's got to sit there and wait for the traffic to get out of
To
his way so
clear.
he can get in.
I think that's going to be really interesting.
That's
to,
the only,
to see what the
to make that.
turning
Yep.
radiuses look like with that, with any kind of proposed curb cuts. And I do think that you make a really good point, Craig, that when we're talking about those
Then he's
turning
lugging up a hill
radiuses,
too. That's the
yeah,
other thing.
we need to keep in mind the grade of the ground, and also do we have enough room to get a truck in there and out of there with cars parked? Because that's something that's pretty realistic during the busy season, that there will be cars parked on there. So those are pieces that we could definitely pass on as well as an expectation, saying, hey, we need to figure out these problems as well, so that we don't make the problem bigger.
I think that's number 4 on their
I
list,
think
pretty
that-
well
Pretty-
described.
Yep, exactly.
So what do you want to do?
So if we have a resolution, this is the first, like he said, this is the first step of pursuing something like this, because this is an improvement to an alleyway. This is the first step, so that we have the opportunity to assess to the benefit of properties.
Well, yeah,
Well, okay,
unless you're the
how-
homeowner or Gordy Lundquist cabins, I don't know if it's necessarily an improvement to
He
them.
has a driveway there too. You see that?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
The one that goes up.
There's
like
one,
that.
Yeah.
there's
kind of a
two.
shared-
One goes straight, one goes
But
up the
what I'm
alley,
saying
and then
is-
there's 1, 2, 3 and a half.
Do you really want it to be
3.5.
better traffic flow in that alley for people to go by more or faster or?
Well, the point is to have traffic flow so that those businesses have
So it can be more
flow.
effective.
And if you're trying to get trucks to unload for that one business, or even
Two.
trucks unload, I don't know who, the pharmacy I suppose has most of the UPS and the FedEx stuff, but, nonetheless, they have trucks too.
They probably, not a 40-foot, but there probably
Yeah.
is a
Yeah.
handle truck that delivers.
But is this above and beyond? I mean, this is not part of the Highway 61 project. This is something separate.
This is
Is that
city
what we're
stuff.
talking?
This is ours
All right.
entirely.
Okay.
Well, I think this is a good starting point to try to decide if this is something we want to engage in, but without having the level of information that, LHB can provide. I mean, I don't know how we even begin to proceed. I mean, the questions you raise, the issues that are out there, the complexity of the situation, I think it bears getting that information and then trying to make a decision about, best way to proceed.
So the resolution is the first step. We're doing that. So does anybody have strong feelings about that moving forward?
Well, I would make a motion to approve Resolution 2019-05 to prepare the report.
Yep. And also to authorize assessment and such.
What?
Or
It
to
doesn't.
Potential. That's the potential.
I mean, you haven't even talked about it yet, but if you want it to be an option at all, you have to start with this step.
That's what I meant. So there's a motion. Is there a second for that motion?
So we're approving them to take a look at it. Is that
Yep,
what we're
they're
doing?
just doing the feasibility
There's the
study.
feasibility.
Yep.
We're not
We're
deciding.
not doing
whether we're
design
going
work or
ahead
anything like
Nope.
that?
No, the feasibility study is a basic design.
They're going to do design too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to show us
It'll be a preliminary
exactly what
design,
they
won't
said
be-
here.
yeah,
So they're
won't be
talking about
finished.
It's not bid
inverted,
documents, but it'll be a design of basically what's going to get built.
inverted V, how they would handle all the driveways in there,
Yeah.
and then the entrances and exits with their turning radiuses. So that's what we're talking about. Either British, non-British. Is there a motion for, or is there a second for that, or is it just curious?
I'm just reading
I don't know, I'm
this
just-
again.
Yeah,
Got
cool.
mixed feelings about it. Part of me tells me it's just a waste of time because it's kind of like a really bad spot to make better,
It's a bad spot to make it better.
Yeah, that's just, I mean, really, you're gonna put a Band-Aid on a, I don't know.
Well, that isn't a way.
I mean, I understand the fire hydrant, if that goes, that helps. You're not gonna get any more space back there. There just isn't. Getting rid of the poles will help a little bit on the south side of the alley, may give you some more space, but that just gets you closer to the buildings. How close do you want to be to a building? 3 inches, 4 inches, 5 inches, I mean, for a big truck.
Right.
I'm not talking cars. Cars are fine, and
Right.
that kind of thing. Also, snow removal. We're gonna start plowing snow. No, we don't do that now, do we? In that alley.
That's
So it's got to go somewhere. out in the street.
Well, and
Down
does
to
it
the highway.
necessarily have to
Doesn't
be
stay
that we
trucked.
put that we allow a truck with a 30-foot trailer? I mean, can it be designated that it cannot be used for that?
I mean, knowing that it's difficult to do is different than saying it's impossible to do.
Right.
At some point, the drivers are making their own decisions about where they feel confident to go and not. We have to rely on them as professionals to do that at some level. We want the engineers to design it as best as they can, but the drivers are going to self-police most of this. I mean, we watch full-size semis back down the alley here between White Pine
Sven's.
and Sven's
Yeah.
every day. So, I mean, and there's plenty of far more developed cities than we that have deliveries done in tougher spots than that. It's just that this happens to be a really tough one in comparison to the rest of our town.
I guess my thought on it is that if the overhead power lines, which from what I remember in walking around, because I think I walked around that with you or with Matt or something, especially the one down there, yeah, that one, the one right at the T alley.
They run down the
T alley.
south side of the alley, yeah.
Yeah.
That one seems like it's right in the way. It's like in the alley right away.
They're all in the alley right away.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if that's being addressed, if they're talking about abandoning that fire hydrant and moving it down, so that in and of itself will do a lot. I don't know what it does to the stormwater and some of those things that they're talking about, and if the residents that are on the south side especially are concerned, or businesses are concerned about the issues that are happening there, then I think maybe there is some reason to do a feasibility study on it. But if what we would potentially get out of that is the city would pick up the share of fixing that, plus there would be assessments to all the adjoining properties on the cost. If we're already doing the power and removing that, I guess I don't know how much I see. Look at the buildings, right? We know we're going to get rid of the power poles no matter what, and the fire hydrant. The buildings are still going to be where they're at.
So
What
you're-
else are we going to possibly, again, I'm not an engineer, but like those seem like the real disruptors in the situation.
What are we going to gain? Is that what your question is from?
And I guess that's the point of the feasibility study is,
Right.
but we're not going to gain spatially if those things are already going to happen, is all that's my
We're going to
point.
gain, I mean, one of the biggest things that we're going to gain, I think, realistically, keeping in context the conversations we've already had, is we're going to gain some kind of stormwater management for the alleyway itself, because right now where the stormwater goes, when it rains, it goes all over the place on the south side there.
Yeah,
Well,
it goes
and
into
you
that
have-
guy's
So we
house
got-
and that
and you
guy's
have
yard.
Six properties in there? 6 property owners?
1, 2,
Six
Yep.
property owners.
2 on the north,
Yeah.
3,
and if the
4, 5,
going
6.
back to what Craig was saying, the driver seems to, a big part of it seems to be, it's like, how is, the Harbor House going to get deliveries? Well, if I was Gordy, or maybe even Todd, or the little house that's Kitty Wampus there, I don't care about getting deliveries. And if I'm going to get a who knows what the amount is, but an assessment period, whether it's $500 or $5,000, I don't.
Why do I want
I
to
don't-
pay that
I-
for one
why would
place to
I-
get
I
some
don't-
groceries?
Why would I, I would be, because then it's going to come to that point where, well, even if 4 out of the 6 want it, there's still going to be the other, I don't know, I mean, I guess, to me, I'm a
Be
little
a
bit.
real shock to have an actual construction project that everybody wanted equally.
Absolutely, no, I understand that, but again, because of what we're talking about with the spatial relationship of what exists there, that we're already eliminating those telephone poles and the hydrant.
Which we've identified as the majority of the problem.
No, we have not.
No,
We're talking about that in here, looking at a picture.
right.
I mean, there's a lot of other issues that are going to be dealt with, and we won't really know how to appropriately deal with them unless we ask the engineers to study it for us.
Well, and LHB is already going to look at Fifth Avenue West anyway, right? Because they are doing that part
For the county?
for the county. So are we then kind of duplicating a bit of what we're doing?
No.
Are we doing
We're
this a
taking
little
advantage
too?
in savings and the fact that they've already looked at that driveway apron area.
The
and they've got a
entrance
starting
area
point.
they got to look
Yeah.
at for sure when doing 5th.
Well, I guess maybe it makes sense. Maybe I'd second that. I mean, I'd second the motion. I think if we can get this right, because then we'll get a number that we can look back and say like, oh, that seems like whatever the number is, right? If it's $15,000 to fix this, you know, which I really doubt it would be, but if it was, right, then it's like, okay, yeah, great, let's do that. This will fix things, and it'll make the stormwater better to go along with what we're trying to do with our stormwater management plan. And if it's $250,000, and we can break out what the assessments and the cost of the city would be versus the adjacent property owners, you might be like, yep, well.
Well, and that's listed right on the resolution. Like, the resolution, it says very plainly on there.
What's the resolution?
That
I'm just telling you why.
Thanks for doing that.
From my original argument, why
Just from
I
a
decided to
procedure.
second it procedurally.
Yep, so it says, in there, advising the council in a preliminary way as to whether the proposed improvement is necessary, cost-effective, and feasible, and to whether it should be best
And to
made as
assess
proposed or in
benefit
connection with
of
some other improvement, and the estimated cost of the improvement as recommended.
So that language that's in there is all pretty much standard form statutorily for projects that you might assess. And the reason that it's all standardized is because if you borrow money that you're using special assessments to cover, there's specific rules about what has to happen in order to do it. In this case, there's one more thing to mention about assessments, and again, I'm not suggesting that you do them or assuming that you're going to, but if you want them to be an option, because we didn't receive an official petition for improvement from these property owners, then when you take further steps on this, it'll take a 4/5 vote of the council to make assessments happen. So that, you can, at any point, you can decide we don't want to do the assessments, and you can just order the improvement yourselves. You're going to pay for it, and a simple majority works. But as we go through this process and you do end up wanting to do assessments, it'll take a 4/5 group of you to do that because it was not petitioned.
So there you go.
Well, I'd like to see it done without assessments. I don't think too many people are going to be very happy about
I think you're probably right.
they're getting assessed to take care of the DOT's mess up on the Highway 61 project. I wouldn't be very thrilled if I owned a piece of property there right now.
But I think the only person
You know,
that really affects
I'm
is the Harbor House Grill.
Well, true, I understand that.
I
But
mean-
I'm just saying that this is coming along, it's coming with the Highway 61 type project, and this was thrown out many times to me during this process, is this is gonna be the solution to the no truck parking on the highway. And I just,
It's a hard one to swallow there.
Yeah, I agree.
so I mean, I don't agree with it.
So it seems like
If
we
we're gonna
have,
fix it up, but I don't feel that I want to pass. It's gonna improve people's properties, yeah, I get that, but you know what? What are we gonna do with the other alleys in this town that need work?
right.
I mean, are we gonna fix those up?
Well, we-
And does it necessarily improve property if it increases the traffic flow and you
Well,
get more
no,
and more
I'm just-
people around your,
Well, the traffic
So-
flow is there right now. We know that.
Yeah.
Just go back there and watch it.
yeah.
It's just that they're driving on
dirt.
crap, I mean, fix it up. So, I mean, it's, whatever.
So we have a couple options here. So we have a motion and a second. We've had good conversation about this. If this motion passes, then we're going to go down this path. We're going to go down this path of having a feasibility study done to see whether it is necessary, cost-effective, and feasible. If this motion does not pass, then that leaves us, in a position where there are other things we can do. And then we can move forward with the removal of the hydrant, removal of the poles, and all the other things that we mentioned, like what Anton said. But then we will not have that additional information to see whether or not improvements to the rest of the alleyway will benefit the properties, benefit the stormwater, benefit those other areas of the project as it's identified in the resolution. So that's pretty much where we're at with this one. So I'm going to ask if there are any final comments regarding this one.
Just that my thoughts are is that, what we're trying to do is, at least what I'm suggesting, is that we're acting in a responsible way to gather information so that we can present that information to the property owners, so a decision can get made about how to manage this, the city alley. And without that information, we're going to continue to identify this as a problem area, but not really have any real means or ability to work with the property owners to resolve that. And
Fair enough.
I think this helps us either decide to go ahead and do it or decide not to do it, but, you know.
I think what he said was he could second it. I don't think he officially did, so.
He
He did.
Oh, did he? Okay.
Well, we at least assumed that was what he said.
Well, I know, but I didn't know how.
Okay, so final comments? Anybody?
Bring the property owners in on some conversation. I think
Yeah,
that's
we
important
definitely-
at this point. You know.
Definitely have to.
I guess that was my last question, not only, obviously.
Yep.
Was how.
I didn't talk to any property owners.
How was it brought, like, forward? If we didn't get, like, the formal petition from?
It's, the origin of it was the Highway 61 design conversations.
Okay,
And it was identified then that we should look at making improvements to this alley.
okay.
Then I've had conversations with 4 of the 6 owners about the improvements, get their feedback, but mostly just to talk about what we're planning on doing in terms of process. And there's really not anything to talk about until there's a design to look at.
And I've spoken with about half of them, or I've had them speak to me about improvements, and they made it pretty clear that that they would be in favor of improvements. Now, that's just in favor of improvements, that's not anything beyond that, so that's, and that's just, you know, allegorically what people have said to me when we've had conversations about it, so. Any final conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Okay, thank you for the conversation. We'll move on that, and we will gather some information. So the last thing on our agenda is time set aside for the 2020 budget. Just for the record, we have, the council met prior to the meeting at 6:30 to discuss some of the foundational work for the 2020 budget. Met with Fire Captain Ben Silence, Fire Chief, with Ben Silence to discuss his budget. We have not had an opportunity in the near future. We have a meeting set for September 4th, right?
Well, 4th, hopefully.
4th.
It's
And
tentative, it's not set, but I'm hoping we will.
is there anything else that you wanted to mention in that regard?
All your previous work was live streamed and it's available for people to view.
Correct.
On our regular means. And we'll do that with all of your budget hearings. The 4th is, there's a 6 o'clock meeting where we're going to be doing housing work. And the PUC normally meets at 3 and the Planning Commission normally meets at 4. And so I thought we could probably sneak in a budget session with Dave and Paul and talk about parks and golf at 5. If that works for people, and get that done in that hour, and then have the housing meeting at 6.
How long is the housing workshop going?
Probably a couple hours.
I'm hungry.
Yeah,
That's why I gotta plan better.
Well, we can take care of that if we're gonna take all your time with meetings.
I went home loaded up before that meeting. Anyway. Great, so that's all you have for that. We do, Patrick, do you have the meeting schedule up on the live stream right now? Or
Yeah.
Okay, so these are upcoming meetings. I looked at the records and we do have a joint meeting coming up and I'm uncertain as to whether or not that was scheduled for the 4th or not. So
Well-
that's something, if it's scheduled for the 4th, we need to reschedule that.
It's not been scheduled,
Okay.
and I thought that it was gonna be later in the month, but I don't believe we picked a date, and if we did, I don't remember what it is, so if any of you all remember.
I can touch base with
Is it
the
Kimber?
county and with some other folks about that as well.
I
too.
thought.
But we were planning on hosting it, I think, so we could
Right,
probably
and
just
that's
pick a
what I'm
date and tell
saying.
people.
Well, touch base with them and see what works best for them. Because we have started to figure out some kind of a structure that works best with most
Did we have
people's-
another date set as well for when we meet with the county for some of our stuff with them?
We didn't. We talked about doing the same arrangement where we would meet with them prior to the joint meeting and then go to the joint meeting after that.
Yes. So Mike and I will we'll talk to the other entities and we'll try and figure something out that'll work.
You're making September pretty thick.
Yeah, kind of have
Yes.
to. All right, so with no further budget conversation, that moves us on to the council and staff reports. So, Craig, because you sit on the edge of the table, you're
I
up.
didn't, we have a meeting next week, right? Yeah. And then nothing.
All right, so that's it?
Yep.
Anton?
I've gotten a couple more emails about the elm trees on Highway 61.
I've got a lot of that stuff. I need some letters if you want some.
Huh?
See, I got letters I can give people.
Oh,
What do I do with them? We're gonna talk about that?
sure. Yeah, I think, well, I got emails and phone calls.
Yeah, I'll handle some stuff.
And then I also got a call, I think it was a call or an email about wondering about if there isn't an ordinance about it, but for businesses like posting if they're spraying
I got that as well.
chemicals or like insecticides, like notifying people that if they're gonna have that going on, like when it was done and what it was. Because apparently that happens over on that side of the harbor, like weekly, and somebody brought it up to me that
Where's that?
over,
I believe it's the spraying for cluster flies. Like that in the summer season, the spraying for cluster flies happens on a pretty regular basis to keep them under control. And the chemicals that they use for that are actually like not a controlled substance, but there's a term for that, for that type of chemical that you should be posting when you're applying it to a public area or an area that's.
and I don't know if it has to do with like the applicator, is that's who's responsible for that because of how they're licensed or whatever.
Right.
But I was contacted about it, so I guess I just thought I'd bring it up.
Right. And I took that to mean basically that, it's like how if somebody's spraying a lawn for dandelions or something like that, they put those little things that in the grass that say, sprayed on this date, stay off until this date, that kind of a thing. But I don't know, that might be something that we consider, just keeping an eye on it, at least maybe contacting the people that do the spraying around and say, hey, make sure you're aware of this, something like
Find
that.
out,
So, yeah. Anything else?
And then I missed the meeting. I missed the meeting about the when George was here, and so following up on us having a conversation, if there's more conversation to have, or just making sure I'm not out of the loop on the climate
There hasn't been anything further.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we're still trying to figure out what the next step, like how to proceed with that. So we've gotten to the point where we're working on. I'm going to work on writing a letter. I've had a couple of rough weeks, so it hasn't
Yeah.
been
Oh, yeah.
hasn't been a very conducive time for me to compile that information. For writing a letter to our state and federal representatives saying, hey, these are the things that Marais has done, and these are the things that we're committing to work toward, and we need your help to do this. And then also to have those resolutions that are being brought forward on state and federal legislatures, seeing if those are things that the council wants to jump on board with, to sign on and say, yeah, we support this legislation. So that's pretty much where we're at right now. We should expect to see that in one of the next meetings. So depending on how busy we are, although we're going to get into the budget stuff pretty soon, we're pretty busy.
Then the last thing, I guess, is there's engine braking sign, vehicle noise sign on 61 coming in. Is there one on that side of town? And if there isn't, why not? And also, when you're coming into town, you can come into town from the
From the
Gunflint Trail.
Gunflint too, yeah. Consistency and signage.
Consistency and signage would be my thing. That's all I got.
Think we can take a look at that. Tim?
I haven't been to any meetings, but I just wondered if there was any follow-up with the conversation we had at the last council meeting about the survey and whether or not, took the survey down, obviously, and if there's been any conversations, follow-up from Chris. Well, you saw the memo from Chris, but internally with staff about how they might continue to gather information.
Yep, we'll give you an update when it comes around the table.
All right, thanks.
Kelly?
I don't have anything. I went to attend the YMCA meeting last week in the building. They were in the community center. The building was locked. I couldn't get in. When the person left for the day, she locked. Pulled on the door and they didn't hear. So,
That's interesting.
yeah.
Um,
So I'll send notes.
Okay, cool. I have been out of town for a while, getting back caught up now. Again, getting lots of communications from people in town about various topics, trees and surveys and things like that.
This guy sent me an email, you could just pass it on.
And I do have an update about, so we authorized a Green Step Cities intern at the beginning of the summer, a student at the University of Minnesota Duluth, who is going to work on getting everything compiled and get all of our information updated with Green Steps for the state of Minnesota. And that person is wrapping up their work for the summer, so there should be a report sometime in the next month or two as we can fit it into the agenda with the accomplishments that came forward with. So just something to be aware of with that. But other than that, I was really glad that Patrick was able to attend the Grand Marais Business Coalition meeting because I was not in town for it. So that's that.
I have a couple other things.
Yep.
I got an email from Steve Fernland. I don't know if you did.
Maybe.
He used to own the Cook County News Herald. This is about the
Oh, we all got that, didn't we?
social media thing we did.
Yep.
He responded to it. I'm pretty sure everybody got it. I mean, it came in my email, so I'm sure he took it off of there. I also got a letter from a resident who comes up here, who was actually at the meeting when the DOT was here talking about the trees and stuff, so he sent me an email. I think he sent an email to all of you too, Mr. Alan Clark. And I also had the privilege to kind of have an arborist in the family. Sister to my daughter's husband was the arborist at Boulder, in Boulder, Colorado. She's now working at Mackinac Island for the huge resort out there. And we did have a discussion about cutting down trees and cutting down trees and bike paths and all these things because she's experienced all of this in her job. And one thing that came out of this whole conversation is you just don't cut down old growth trees. You work your bike paths around them. You work your streets around them, especially when they're in significant areas like our trees are in our town. Now, this might be redundant because the state is in charge of this right now, but it's food for thought if any of you are hungry. That's how I put it. So it was very interesting to talk about that, how things are run on Mackinac Island and how things are run in Boulder, Colorado. So it was just interesting to talk about that. I just thought I'd put that out there for you. That's about all I got.
Okay. You guys have an update of sorts?
So, let me switch this over so people can see. This is the next tool that we're proposing to use to gather information from the public. This will be a mailer that will go out with PUC bills, so all the PUC customers will get this in their mailbox, and we're asking them to select 3 of their top concerns, check the boxes. They can also, we've included, I have no concerns, or a space to write in. From some of the data we received in our previous efforts, there wasn't really any selection of smoke as an issue, so we took that out and replaced it with lighting, because it felt like that maybe was an oversight in the first round of information gathering. So this is the next step, along with creating a little bit more information about what we're doing and why we're doing it.
So a little more information about what we're doing and why we're doing it. Patrick's produced a video. Some of you were asked to be a part of it. We'll show it to you before we release it. We also had Stacy from the Planning Commission help out. And the idea is to just offer some background and explanation about what's going on. That's some of the feedback we received, was that people would appreciate more of that. They want to know what their input's being used for, how it's going to be used. So we're trying to get the word out that way. That'll be a video. We'll also prepare a press release that has similar information to the video to try and get some background about what's going on and how we're getting the information, what we're going to do with it.
Is there a way to add something to this to kind of establish our intent? Rather than just saying we want to try to gather information, I think, with the intent that we're looking at ordinance amendments or changes or something along those lines that kind of spells out what the next step in this process is.
I think that would be helpful to understand that all of this came about because of our trying to clarify the code or codes or update. Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting thing to talk about, because that's part of the story that we're trying to tell with some of these information pieces, is where did this all come from?
Okay.
And for different people, there's different origin stories of how this was created. And one of the things that is from my bias on this is it's not just about updating the code, that the code is not necessarily the answer to all these issues. And some of the reasons why we're doing this have to do with where we've looked at our existing code, talked about enforcing it, and decided it wasn't appropriate. So maybe code updates are part of the answer. Maybe there's other programs that are part of the answer. Maybe the part of the answer is there isn't the issue that we thought there was. So we're really not sure of a clear path forward on this. And all we know about is the process where we're going to help you move forward by giving you some information from the community about what the priorities are in terms of issues. And when we know that, then we're going to go back and have more conversations about what the appropriate responses are with the community before you're asked again to enforce ordinances or create programs or spend resources or any of those things.
One of the things Patrick and I talked about a little bit, and I know it's not here and I'm not sure how to fit it in, but when we talk about things either contributing to or detracting from community health, sometimes that's a broad thing that it can be kind of hard to define. When I think about this and when I think about the pictures, whether they're here or whether we would have looked at just pictures in general of anywhere, is we're talking about our neighborhoods. That's really what came to mind for me, is what kind of neighbor do I want to live next to? And when you talk about origin, for me, it's been people actually calling me or stopping me and talking about where they live or what's happening in their neighborhood and what things look like or what they have to look at. And what kind of neighbor do I want to be? And I don't know how we fit that word in here exactly. Again, the community health thing to me seems a bit ambiguous, but that's really what, for me, I'm looking at is how do we want our neighborhoods, which includes downtown. And even though they're business owners, that's your next business is your neighbor. And how do we want things to feel? And so I don't know if somehow we can fit that word in there, or maybe everybody here thinks it's inappropriate or I'm looking at it the wrong way, but that's what I think about when I'm talking about whether my neighbor has 4 trailers of garbage cans, 6 junk cars that have been there for 10 years and 3 tents in their yard. That's not what I want to live next to. So does that mean that I need to sell my house and move? does that mean that we all need to build fences around our property so we don't have to look at it? Or does it mean that I want to somehow try to work with my neighbor and then if say, hey, here's programs, here's opportunities, how can I help? Do you know there's ordinances in place, but there also is a place where you can go and here's a listing of how you can get help. It's being that good neighbor. So I just want to leave that out there because I think sometimes that got lost in the discussion and the frustration. I understand being frustrated, but I also think that we need to be good neighbors to one another when we have these discussions. And it's okay to be mad with us. I'm fine with that. But some of the things that people say, I just think it's like, come on, let's be civil about it. Let's try to talk in a nice way and still make headway.
Fair enough. So there's a little bit more feedback for you.
Mm-hmm.
And with this list, I see things that are missing on there that to me, would seem to be an obvious thing that people would be concerned about. And I think just the concept of garbage and trash, which isn't mentioned on there, maybe it's part of accumulation of filth, but I think that's filth, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That seems to, I'm not sure what that necessarily means. People, I think, understand trash and garbage.
I took it as a synonym. That's what I thought they meant.
Yeah.
Well, it might be, but there could be other
Stuff.
too that.
Well, it has to stay somewhat vague in order to get broad selection.
Yeah.
And there is a write-in for those folks that feel the same way you do, that there's something I want to say that's not on here.
Or that isn't captured in the way that you feel it should be captured.
And none of these are captured in the way that they should be captured yet. Any one of these issues, when you see enough data that you're satisfied that there's a couple of these that you want to do more work on, then we'll have to dig in and say, okay, well, what do we mean by accumulation of filth? What parts of that are the things that the city needs to address? What parts of that are the things that are bothering people? And we'll be able to get a little deeper and more specific about a particular issue once we've decided which ones we want to spend time on.
One thing I think is this is a pretty ambiguous undertaking that all of us are doing, and not. If anyone has questions about this, what does this mean? How are you going to use this information? I'm happy to field those questions and go as deep as people want to go. If they want to call the office or stop by or email. Part of the issue is that trying to communicate this in a sheet of paper is just probably not going to happen.
Right.
And it's going to be it has to be a bigger conversation than what we can do with one sheet of paper or one video. Like, it's going to be an ongoing thing, so we're going to need to talk to each other about it as we go. And I'm here happy to talk to people. I'm sure you guys are all happy to talk to people about how it's working and what do we mean by these things, how are we going to use the information. So
Anything else?
Can I suggest that we put a couple more items on there? Because my concern is that if it's not on that list, it's going to be, by reference, just by having it on the list, people are going to see that and take notice of it. If it's not on the list, they have to really think about what else might be an issue and place it on there. And it might be just easier to just check a couple boxes and then to actually fill in something as a write-in. And I was thinking, junk cars, because that's, to me, always one that people seem to take offense at. If their neighbor has a junk car sitting there, weeds growing up around it, whatever, people take note of that. And is it an issue? I don't know if it's an issue, but it's one that I've always heard concerns about. And then the other, if you want to leave accumulation of filth in there, but I would just put trash and garbage as another one, and maybe they check it twice, I don't know.
Well, could we just change it to accumulation of trash and garbage? Would that answer your concern?
That would be fine for me.
I don't think that's a big enough change that it makes a difference to the people that have selected it already.
No. I made a comment as well about how the items listed below, check your top 3 concerns. To change how that's said so that it says that, prioritize these, to the top 3 concerns. I spoke with Patrick about it.
This is my response to that.
Oh,
so
that's a
maybe we have
response?
to-
Maybe that's what this is.
I don't think
Okay.
it's accumulation
Maybe
of
that's
trash. I'm thinking more along the lines of accumulation of clutter. I mean, stuff that shouldn't be in front of your house. I mean, I'm not, trash and garbage. I don't see a lot of trash and garbage in front of people's houses. I mean, Monday morning when they're picking up the garbage, there might be some, but what are you trying to get out of that? Trash and garbage doesn't really, it's not doing anything for me. I mean, that's not what I see. I mean, that's not what I see.
Yeah,
Is
thank you.
I'm more concerned about it.
These guys.
Like you said, junk cars. Okay, that's one thing, but maybe it's not just junk cars. Maybe it's junk. Period.
Junk in
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, junk.
That shouldn't
that's
be
a harder one.
stored in that spot.
Right.
That's what I'm getting at.
Outdoor storage.
Outdoor storage?
But that to me is so broad that, it could be anything.
Well, that's
It's
isn't,
outside, but
I
there's
think-
I think there's some particular instances where, I've heard from people that, why does that person get to store or have that stuff in their yard when nobody, does anything about it, and they don't seem to care anything about it. And
It's not really trash or garbage.
It's not really trash or garbage,
Right.
it's stuff, just
Right.
stuff.
we have to start at a broad
I was going to
level.
say, are we starting, we have to remember we're starting at a 10,000-foot level. So if that becomes, whatever the word, accumulation of stuff, clutter, garbage, junk, whatever the word is, if that gets checked a lot, that's telling us
Dig in.
people, we need to look into that. And then we dial down and figure out what more specifically are they talking
Cars,
about.
garbage.
Is it cars? Is it wood piles? Is it people don't pay for garbage service, so it is building up in bags in the yard? I think that we want the broad scope, not the defined scope at this point.
I'd also say this, we've collected a lot of data already, and I don't want to start talking about the results of that yet until we're done, because we don't want to influence people. But I think what we have is working for most people in terms of the ones that have tried to tell us something have found a place to do that. And, we're not trying to get people to pick any of these. We don't know if these are problems or not. Everybody's got different opinions about what they mean, and yet they still seem to be creating some results that I think you'll be able to use.
There you go. So we can consider the trash and garbage one.
Well, you got to tell us now, because this is going to go tomorrow if it's going to go.
I like the getting rid of the filth and saying trash and garbage, because
I'm
filth
fine
to
with
me means some kind of putrid mess that, and I'm not sure that that's really what is intended there.
I'm fine with that. I think that's clear. Anybody else?
Okay, that's 3 yeses. We'll do that.
All right. Anything else for this? I know you have a few more tools that you're working on, but those will come later. So, okay. Anything else?
Thank you for your work on this. I know it's not easy.
You're welcome.
Okay, hearing nothing else, we're adjourned. 8:07.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Have a good night.